Hey, everybody. On the show today, you're about to hear a conversation with Danny and Rhonda Sinquefield. They led a church for 27 years in the Memphis, Tennessee area, and they have lots of lessons learned. But there were interesting stuff came out of this.
Yeah, one thing she mentioned was how their transition was hard for her because typically she's used to coming home and really Danny processing with her, things going on, decisions being made, vision casting seasons. And now they're in a different role and she's not privy to that. And that's hard because I think so many times we think of the pastor's wife as supporting the husband, as in making sure the kids are taken care of, making sure the meal is on the table, making sure that we're present. But people underestimate how much, you're married and the husband has to have someone that's safe. So the husband comes home and talks so much about, I received this email today. I'm having to make this decision today. And then when that is removed, there is a loss of identity because you're really their helper in that way.
She becomes an advisor, and they make decisions often together. Though
Yeah, that's what she said.
He's the one that announces the decision, but people don't understand that was a decision that he and Rhonda talked through and made together.
Typically, no pastor's making a decision normally without praying with his wife at length at home.
And that's one of the challenges of being, I think, a pastor's wife today, in that people don't often understand that she carries a lot of the weight of the ministry. Mm-hmm. It's not like she's separate from it. She's in it. Mm-hmm. And so I love the way that she mentioned that today of how hard that was when they moved into a season where she wasn't able to advise him anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you'll enjoy this episode. Lots of great stuff comes up in terms of how do you transition a church? When do you know it's time to turn it over? To how do you not take too much of your identity from the church? Mm-hmm. All lessons that they've learned. Today we have some amazing friends from the Memphis, Tennessee area, Danny and Rhonda Sinquefield. Welcome to the show.
Hey,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben and Lindley. Honored to be with you guys.
Well, Lindley and I were with you all not long ago, and Rhonda was talking about one of the challenges of being a former pastor's wife, and that when you now step into a church, you feel a little bit like, where do I sit? Like I've always had my seat, I've always had my place, and now I don't. And as you and I were talking about that, Lindley, we were discussing just how hard it is to separate who I am as a person from the position I hold in the local church.
Yeah.
So we thought, let's have them on. Let's have them talk about, first of all, their faithful ministry in local church, but then being a transition into what were some of the things they've learned now about identity and purpose in the midst of all that. So why don't you guys start by giving us a little bit of a synopsis of your ministry?
Yeah, sure. Let me, I'll introduce just our family and let Rhonda take you on the brief journey. So we've only had a few stops along the way, just been long tenure ministry positions. But so Rhonda and I have been married for over 40 years, 43 years. We married while we were young in college, in ministry. So all we've ever known as life together in the local church in ministry. So we've grown through that. God's blessed us with 3 sons, all grown, and they have given us 7 incredible grandchildren. So we have 5 boys, and finally we have 2 little girls. So 7 grands, all live, pretty close. We'll talk. One of our sons has moved away. He's a pastor in a neighboring town, another county, not far from here. So, but Rhonda can talk about our little brief journey and where we've stopped along the way.
Yeah. So when we got married, we were serving in a mission church in Walls, Mississippi. It's one of those situations where you say, "I'll never go to Mississippi." And our first church was Mississippi.
There you go.
And so that was a great journey there for a couple years. Yeah. And then we ended up in Central Florida, Apopka, Florida, Trinity Baptist Church. Loved it there. Thought we would spend our life in Central Florida. Our 3 boys were born there. We had a small town. We came back to Memphis to serve at Ellendale Baptist Church. Danny's mom was very sick and eventually passed away. And we actually went back to the church in Florida and served another 6 years or so, moved right back into our same house, all those kind of ministry things that happen where you don't sell your home and things. But we loved Central Florida and loved serving there. And then the Lord called us back to Memphis. That was not a place that we thought we would raise our family. We grew up in a hard time in the life of Memphis and racial tensions, and weren't sure about that. But God has given us such a heart for Memphis. And as of this fall, we've been here 30 years.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So 27 of those years, senior pastor at Faith Baptist Church in Bartlett, which is just in Shelby County.
It sounds like you were very, very happy and settled in Florida, and then you get called to Memphis. So what makes you leave? Like, what makes you think, okay, why don't we go to Memphis instead of staying where we're very happy? Because I know we get that all the time from pastors. Like, why do we have to move? Why do we feel called? What is the calling?
Right. There was no reason. We were so happy there. We loved it. Danny had moved from going as youth minister to associate pastor. He is such a gifted second guy in the church. He lifts up the pastor and loves on the pastor. And so when this church contacted us about becoming senior pastor, actually, I was pretty scared about it because I thought, you're really a great behind the scenes guy. And so can we really do this? And it was also coming to a church which was a product of a split. They didn't even have a facility. So I was like, oh, Lord, what are you doing here? But we knew for sure. There was no doubt that the Lord was calling us away from Trinity and calling us to faith.
Yeah, the call, and you probably hear that a lot, obviously, is the anchor for everyone in ministry, much like your journey, going from a church that you loved and led well, and then going far away, to Colorado and then coming back to Tennessee. So, we were first time senior pastor coming back to Memphis. Rhonda had never been a pastor's wife. I mean, a senior pastor's wife, the first lady, as some people call it. And so, we had a long conversation about that. I just, she didn't want to be the piano player, singer, pastor's wife. That's not who she is. So she has her skill set and she found her niche and she has flourished in that role.
Well, Danny, let me ask you this before we jump into a couple other questions. We hear this all the time. I've been at it for many years. I'm wondering if it's time to hand off the church. You wrestled with that, I think, for years, just trying to figure out what was the right time. How long is too long at Faith? What kind of led you to where you finally landed on, okay, 27 years is the time?
Yeah, we have loved every minute of our journey with Faith. It's not been all that easy, especially, the early days were, pretty tough. But as the church, grew and the Lord continued to bless, being honestly, having been around some pastor brothers, and this is, very sensitive subject to say, sometimes I've known of pastors who've stayed too long. And, that's not good for them. And it's certainly not healthy for the church. For the church to want them to leave. So I was always kind of gauging that, always kind of, at 20 years, at 25, we almost left and had an opportunity to leave during right before COVID. So glad I stayed because we had to navigate some, pretty interesting days during that. And, and so it really was a combination of feeling something inside of us. Rhonda knew that my heart was shifting a little bit toward a different kind of ministry. To love on pastors, to be a Barnabas, kind of a thing. So we were thinking about all kinds of, independent missionary type things. I didn't know how that was going to look. I just knew that it was the right season for us. It was the right season. And even now, 2.5 years later, looking back at Faith, perfect timing. They've called a great pastor. I haven't been there. I've only been there a couple of times, honestly. Rhonda goes every Sunday. So this is a, unique part of our story. She's still a member. We're still members at Faith. We still live in the town, but I needed to get away to give the new pastor all of his space. We're friends. I love him. He's a great man. I've been invited back two times in 2 years to preach, and that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
We'll get back to this, but there was a topic you brought up there that we were like, this is the topic we want to have is, when do you know it's time? We won't have to go into that now, but you brought up a good subject. That's such a hard thing. I mean, we've all seen that. Like, they've gone too long. And who can tell a pastor it's time to be done? Mm-hmm. So it really has to come from the pastor's family, pastor and wife. Because I tell Ben all the time, I'm like, pastors and weathermen never get fired, even though they maybe should sometimes.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
And somebody needs to, the wife, the spouse, a friend, we need to bring somebody along to say, please tell me,
Yeah.
Tell me when it's time.
Yeah.
Or give me a heads up.
Yeah.
And there were times in our journey, even 10, 15 years in, that he would bring things up like, I don't know if we still got it, if I still got new vision in me, if we're ready to go again. And I felt fearful of that because there's a security in being at a place a long time and having a lot of support and a lot of friends. Our children grew up here. And probably one of my greatest fears going into ministry was, you heard all that, everybody moves every 2 or 3 years. I didn't want that for my family. I'm a real homebody, and I wanted my kids to feel the security of being in one place and hopefully finishing school. And to be honest, when we came to faith, my prayer was, Lord, please leave us here till our kids graduate. That was what I wanted, which would have been, our son's 31, would have been like 13 years ago. And he's blessed us to remain here where our children are close, our grandchildren are close. So he blessed and honored that prayer multiple times, that we weren't moving often.
Well, let's jump into that next season then. Talk about what it was like to start a season where you're going to church, but you're not leading. I'm sure, Danny, was different for you, and Rhonda, you had your own emotions. So talk a little bit about that transition. What was that like?
Yeah, mine's certainly different. For me, I just needed to be sure that the new pastor would love our people well. I mean, it's not like we don't own the church; it's not ours. But there's this sense of, man, we want it to go well. We want the handoff to go well. We want it to be thriving, and so our questions mine were, and they've been answered. Will the pastor love the people well? Will he continue that missional vision that we've worked so hard to establish in our local church? Will he really have, the kind of relationships that will allow him to be, loved and respected as well? So all that's been really smooth. And so my new role with our Tennessee Baptist Convention has really pulled me out every Sunday. So every Sunday, and I just added 2 December Sundays, every Sunday I'm preaching somewhere, which, is kind of a cool thing. So it was a natural thing for me. Rhonda only travels with me when she wants to. Her passion and love has been teaching children's Sunday school. She's been teaching one of the hours of 5th grade Sunday school for 30 years with her team, same people. And that's been a great blessing. She's our Bible drill lady at Faith. And then, so she's sitting in church without me. Our kids will come and she'll have some people to sit with, but that's when that conversation came up. There have been a couple of things that, even looking back, and I'll let Rhonda speak to this, the thing that really has been interesting is that she lost her seat. She always knew where she was sitting. And really with that, her investment or her involvement as a pastor's wife, as you know, Lindley, man, you guys you're in deep. You know everything. You're helping make decisions and bouncing ideas off and all that. But the biggest thing for Rhonda is, she says it better than I am, but I'll just set her up. She's felt invisible, like she's not even there. People don't even realize she's still at the church sometimes, and that's been hard. So I'll let you speak.
It has been interesting, more than I thought. Sorry. I think when you use the word identity, I really had to think through that and work through that in my life. Was my identity Danny's wife? Because we come behind and support you guys so much. I mean, that is my role. That is my calling. And so there's no doubt in my mind that God led him in this new area. He has always been a Barnabas. And for the Lord to open a position that was not even a position, I knew that this was God's plan. There was no doubt in that. I just had to get my act together. And not knowing where to sit is a great analogy to just like, who am I now? And my identity has always been in Christ, and I have no doubts in that. But along with that came a staff wife for 40 plus years. And so that changed. And it's been a good change for me because I love what I do and I love where the Lord's called me. But I had to get serious about my identity is in Christ and Christ alone. And he has still called me to be at Faith. And I'd sit, it's almost a Where's Waldo show. I sit in different places in the sanctuary, and the choir members will say something to me sometime. But that's okay. But it is interesting, and now I've become able to laugh at it, that I am there 90% of the time. But when Danny's there, they'll come and say, oh, we missed y'all so much. It's so good to see you. And I'm like,
I'm right here.
I'm here every week.
Mm.
But that's okay. It really is a great season. I've always been in the background kind of person. I'm not a upfront pastor's wife that speaks and does things like that. And so God just has affirmed. I love being sneaking in, worshiping. I love our new pastor. I didn't want to get in the way either. You know, you hear of nightmares where church members come to the pastor wife to make complaints or things. I didn't want to be there for that. I wanted to love and support them. I love Dr. Lee's wife, Tiffany, and their children. And so I just wanted to be the best church member I could be. And that was a new role for me. Instead of being the best pastor's wife I could be, I want to be the best church member.
Did you guys have conversation with them privately of whether they were comfortable with you staying, your role staying there at Faith?
Good question.
Yeah, we did actually. The new pastor and I meet periodically. We've had breakfast, and we've had dinner together with the pastor and wife. And early on, we had that conversation, and I just made it very clear that I wanted to be sure that he knew that I was going to be a behind-the-scenes supporter, encourager. If he needs me, call me. I'll tell you where the landmines are. I can help you navigate as you get started. And he's done that a few times. But
Tell him what he said to you about. He knew you supported if you.
Oh yeah. So Pastor Lee just said, you know what? As long as you send your family and your finances, we're good. So he doesn't really care if I'm there or not. It's mostly about Rhonda being there and our grandkids being there. So, but we have a great relationship, and I know that's not always common. It's not always the way it is, the way it happens. But I really, really wanted, to give him the space and let him be the pastor.
Yeah.
And we even had the conversation, Rhonda and I, about, should we leave and go to another church? There are a lot of churches in the greater Memphis area. That might have been an easier thing for us at some level, but 30 years, a lifetime of friends, and it's her community. And, I'm staying connected with the church in this. Dr. Lee has allowed me the privilege of continuing the Friday morning men's prayer breakfast. I teach that about 85 or 90 guys every Friday morning at 5:45 a.m. And you know what, Pastor Ben, that's my rhythm. That's my only consistent community. Different churches every week, as you are, but that group of guys, man, I need those men. And Pastor, he doesn't like to get up that early on Friday, so he said, please, if you'll keep lifetime contract. So I have a lifetime contract for that.
That's great.
But I have a question because I have to probe just a tiny bit. When you guys were having this conversation, was it made clear if it does become an issue, some dissension in the church, that you guys would leave? Because I'm thinking of the audience, and there may be a pastor and his wife listening who the former pastor and his wife are staying, but it's causing some problems, and they don't know how to tell them that it's not going well, and we may need you to go somewhere else for a little bit.
It's a great question. I think maybe in our conversation with the new pastor and wife, it was more assumed. I think it's not a bad thing for a pastor to say, who's the outgoing pastor, if he's going to stay in the church, hey, I think the general rule is give the new pastor space. Get away for a while. I think that's probably the better plan.
And I think our heart, we never want to do any damage to the church.
Yeah.
So if anybody would have ever started coming to us about problems or wish Danny was back or is this really working, we would have chosen to leave. I don't want to be part of any of that. Yeah.
So I know it's an issue in our churches nationally, and I think it's a great conversation to have. I think our example would be simply to love the church more than you love your own position, and be sure that you give every opportunity for the new pastor to thrive, for them to succeed.
And honestly, we've thought about a few options because it would be hard to go somewhere else. But with the new church starts coming in the Blue Oval area, we would love to step into one of those rows if needed and help out. That would be a natural in his role for us to go help in a new church start. And
That's good.
Kind of have that in the back of our mind if we ever felt that was God's leading.
We have a plan. We have a plan B.
That's good. In case they don't like you and kick you out. Anyway, one of the impacts that Lindley and I recognized when we came to Lifeway, stepping out of the pastorate, conversation was harder. in the pastorate, we had all the same friends. She knew who I was meeting with. She knew all these people. And so there was a lot of natural conversation that would erupt when we'd go for a walk.
At home, yes.
At home. And we've noticed it's harder in the season when I might have a full day of meetings. She knows none of these people. We'll probably never meet them. I can only imagine that you guys experience that, Danny, as you drop in on all these churches and Rhonda has no relationship with them.
Yes.
Have you guys figured out any ways to continue to cultivate that kind of intimacy?
We're working on it.
Yeah.
It's definitely an issue for
It
us
is,
because she doesn't know the people that I'm meeting with either. Occasionally we try to do ministry together. We've got several marriage conference weekends that we do. We do a lot of bivocational pastors and wives events, and those are kind of the people that she gets to know and love. So that's kind of her, scratching that itch for her of ministry. But from the day to day,
Yeah.
there's a gap there.
It is hard that he mentions all these names and these people, and I have no context of what that is. And the same thing recently, even more noticeable, we don't always know what's going on at Faith. Like we'll see cars in the parking lot and not know what's going on.
Yeah.
One hurtful thing, to be really honest, is the death of church members that we don't hear about until sometimes after the fact.
Yeah.
That's been hard.
And that's been really hard of people that, because, their families don't think about, we need to reach out to Brother Danny or something. And the church just goes and does what the church does.
Right.
So that's been hard that we've heard from Facebook.
I've had my feelings hurt multiple times, but I can't say anything. Rhonda and I, we agonize together. It's like, man, and Pastor and I have a great relationship. We've done funerals together, several of them together.
Yeah.
But then there are these gaps of communication where we're just not in the
We
loop.
don't know, yeah.
And they
don't
didn't
know.
mean to leave you out. Like
Right.
nobody
Right.
sat in a room and said, let's make sure we don't tell Danny and Rhonda.
That's right.
But
I have
it
to
is
remind
hard.
them of that, though, all the time.
But
Yeah,
the
it's hard.
feelings are real, man. The
Yeah,
feelings are real.
Absolutely. And what you said earlier, Rhonda, about it's okay that people don't recognize you when you're apart from Danny. I recognize that's a spirit of forgiveness, but in a way, it's not okay. It hurts. It's a recognition that there was a huge investment you made in the church for many years, and people may not appreciate or recognize it. That's tough. And so, thanks for being real about
We're
that.
still processing all that, honestly, even 2.5 years later.
Yeah,
So-
understood.
So
Trying
are
to-
we
trying to do
5?
it well.
I understand.
We're at year 5, and there's still things that we're trying to figure out. I mean, because essentially, Rhonda, what you're going through now is what I went through here, and it's security and identity of who I am. But also, I mean, we got married at 21. I was 21. Became a pastor's wife at, Inglewood and Jackson at 25, 26. So I hadn't known anything else. And so when we came here, it was like, but I loved serving alongside you. I loved supporting you. I loved doing all these things. And now I don't get to do that. And I had to re-identify, like, what do I love outside of being your helper, your helpmate kind of
Right.
thing.
And we, denominational stuff is different, Danny, we've tried really hard to bring Lindley into the culture of Lifeway, and she's done a lot of things like the Glass House, but it's not near as natural as a pastor and pastor's wife. It's just such a natural context for a couple to be known together in the church. Right. So it's tough.
Here's what I have learned in my 5 years about me is that I really love Life on Life ministry. I love doing this podcast, but we don't get to see people that listen to it. We don't get to really follow up with the guest very much. And so whereas it's a joy to do this, I miss the local church context where we just get to see the same people Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Yeah. And I would suspect, Danny, I mean, that's a hard thing for Ben in church and preaching in different churches is that you don't get to see them the next week. So it's a reshaping of your mind.
Yeah. People ask things like, what do you miss about being the pastor? And I'm quick. I have an answer for that. You know what I miss most? And I guess you guys could identify with, I miss the children.
Mm-hmm.
I miss the hugs, the little notes. Recently, I got invited back to Faith, and several families said, "Oh, Brother Danny's coming. Maybe he can baptize our grandkids," which we did that. And it's like I'm baptizing kids, and I baptize their parents. I've known them, their whole lives, and so it's a generational. And I miss that so much. But then on the positive side, you get to see because when you're a senior pastor of one church for a long time, you don't get out much. You guys are at Inglewood, you don't see other things, but to go into churches that people have never heard of and places that you've never been, and to see great people and God's at work doing really great things. Most of it because they're using, Lifeway resources.
That's right.
But,
Which you can find at lifeway.com.
that's encouraging, So God's at work in places, man, and you get to see that.
Yeah. And there's a breadth of the perspective that you get in being in so many churches that
Yes.
I just didn't know all the things that different churches struggle with because I was always just focused on mine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me flip to you do have multiple children. One of them is a pastor. And I'm not in any way indicating that he's the favorite because he's a pastor. We're not going there. But what do you think about as you see he and his family stepping into ministry and pastoral ministry as they have? What fears do you have for them, or what do you worry about? I hope they do it better than we did it.
Well, so you guys know our son Josh because he was a union guy, and his sweet wife Erin. They're amazing. But if you know Josh, he's our least favorite son. Just so you know,
Go ahead and clear that up.
He thinks the favorite.
Oh, he's good. But so he's been about a year and a half now, something like that, at First Baptist Church in Milan, Tennessee, which is about 100 miles from where we live.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Erin have 3 of our grandsons there. And it's cool to see a family member follow the path or the pattern of ministry. It's been awesome to watch that. And he's done so well. His first year and a half has been nothing but just golden. Church loves him. They had not had a pastor for several years, so they were looking for just anybody, and so that's how that happened. But Josh was a perfect pick for that congregation, and they've grown and they're doing great things. He's adding staff and all that. We talked about the thought of what we would want for them. He's better in so many ways just because he's just amazingly gifted, visionary. He loves people. He's doing good. I think the things that most of our generation of pastors struggle with, I'm talking about mine and Rhonda's generation, is the balance of family and ministry. And I sure hope, we're trying to encourage them. In fact, we kept their 3 kids recently while they went off on a beach trip last week. We want them to have a better balance and a better family, connection. Not that ours was horrible, but we did the best we could.
Sure.
But we're kind of pushing them in that a little bit to pay attention to their marriage, pay attention to the balance with their family. Ministry is consuming. That's the thing. We want him to guard that. So.
That's good. We were so blessed. The church we started at, Inglewood, they were just so supportive of our family. Mm-hmm. I don't think we realized what a gift it was at the time, but we had little children, and we never once felt like the church demanded that we were at an event or that we were making sure I was the one doing all the funerals. It was just such a sweet place. But there are people in contexts where that's not the case, where there's an expectation that ministry comes before family. And it's tough when you're in that situation.
Are you seeing, as you travel around, that there is a younger generation that's trying to take that more seriously? I think you're the first person of your generation that has said, we didn't do it well. We didn't balance things well.
Yeah. I think there's been some lessons learned. A lot of the new and first and young generations folks some of them are pastors' kids. It's just like I did with my dad. I wanted to do it better than he did it. I wanted to learn some things, right? So I want to be careful of that. But I think that being honest. There's some things that, man, I would love some do-overs. That's why we love grandchildren. Grandchildren are like the sovereign grace of God giving us a do-over. And we're so thankful for that because we're much better grandparents, way better.
Would you be comfortable sharing a do-over you wish you could do over?
I sure don't mind. I certainly don't mind. All 3 of our sons, different in their personalities, different in their just their responses to the way we parented or whatever. I came from a background, it was kind of a harsh background. I grew up in an alcoholic family. And so there was a lot of loud, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of, pushing a little bit of the, I'm the dad, so you got to listen to me kind of a thing. I would do that over. I would learn the lesson early that, a soft answer turns away strife. I would be a lot more sensitive to words and the way that I spoke. I would deal with my own anger issues early in the game. I was, I think Rhonda thinks I beat myself up too much over this, but I was overly concerned about what church people thought about our family.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted my kids to be perfect. Well, good luck with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it usually never goes well. And so that's a do-over that I wish
That's
I
really
had.
good. Thanks for sharing that, Danny. Rhonda, do you want to confess a do-over since we're in the confession booth?
I think we made a lot of excuses of why Dad had to be gone for special events, why he had to leave. There's growth for our children and understanding that when people have a death in the family, that they want their pastor there. Those
Yeah.
are things for them to learn. But I think there were also times we could have said, we can go tomorrow, when we felt urgency to be there because the church expected it. I hope that it made our children more compassionate for people, but I think sometimes they became angry when Dad wasn't always at things that he should have been at, ball games and birthdays and ministry things that we always kind of make excuses that that's our calling. I'm reading a book that I shouldn't even bring up, was The Best Next. And I think sometimes we don't always choose the best, and we sacrifice all these little things that we think matter when we have to really find our place and figure out our best at serving our family and the church.
Really good. Well, one of the questions we do love to ask seasoned leaders. Did you see how I said that? Seasoned. Not old, seasoned. Is about advice you've received along the way in ministry, maybe a word of encouragement or something that stuck with you over the years that you pass on to others when you get opportunity. Anything come to mind for you guys?
It was ingrained in me. We had a very, like you, Brother Ben, we had a great mentor, pastor, and pastor's wife. We were there in Orlando, Florida. And, the adage was kind of, seared into our consciousness that your first ministry is your family, and your first, your marriage has got to be priority. And I really did hear that. I believe that. We try to practice that. Mm-hmm. And that's just one of the lessons that, through the years, man, we've just seen so many, good families fractured, and moral failures are far more common than we want to even bring up. It's heartbreaking, actually. So, that's the thing. The adage was, if you lose your family, you lose your ministry. Well, you lose a lot. A good name is more to be desired than great riches. And it's really not about our name. I've learned this, that it's, the church doesn't belong to me. It's Jesus' bride, and it's his name that's on the line. So I would say, whatever you do, brothers and sisters, don't do any harm to the name of the Lord Jesus, because his name is precious.
As we confess to things we didn't do quite right, I still would say to be who God created you to be, not try to be someone you're not, to preach differently than he called you to preach, to serve and to minister differently, just to be who you are, to be honest and upfront. And it took Danny a while to realize. I remember a drive to a church where he was speaking at a conference, and he had asked me to share to the women. And that is uncomfortable for me to do. And so it actually, finally, through tears, that he realized this is not a true gifting of yours, to speak in front of a lot of people, because I don't know, I'm just anxious. And so I think I couldn't be who he wanted to be in that. And we had to come to that realization. I will love you and support you and go everywhere you go and share, almost like Lindley said, face to face, small groups. But it doesn't come natural for me to be a speaker. And so, again, I had to be who I was, and who God created me to be, not who the world thought I might need to be, or who Danny might think I needed to be.
Yeah. So that whole, it's the thing we've said to our staff people, as we've learned. I think God wants us to be ourselves and not prove ourselves. You don't have to prove yourself. Just be who you are.
I liked that. I mean, my favorite part is when, so I've done a series of episodes with some women, pastors' wives women, and we call it Through the Decades, and just stories that they've learned. And one of our questions is a do-over. So I love that you answered that, because sometimes that's hard. It's hard to answer. And I do think that vulnerability has been a learned behavior in the younger generations, and the older generations tend to protect that. I mean, you can hear that in preaching. Older preachers, seasoned, tend to be less vulnerable with things that are hard and happening in their life. So I just love so much that you are willing to share some things that you've learned that maybe you did wrong.
That's
so
really good.
I appreciate that.
We have a few minutes left, so what I'd like to do is ask you guys each some very random questions that I think could be spiced into the show to make this a little spicier.
Oh, Ben is the best at this.
This is the part we don't tell people about because you wouldn't be able to prepare. But here are some questions.
And he hadn't prepared. He's going to shoot these at you.
This is live. What's coming to my brain right now.
Right off the cuff.
Okay. Yeah. Rhonda, Danny seems like such a nice guy. What are a couple of really weird things about him that maybe we don't know? Obsessions with food, socks, anything that comes to mind in terms of things he kind of fixates on?
Our kids laugh at him because I think he becomes overwhelmed very quickly. And he used to always take our dog for a walk, and he would just disappear. We're here eating, and everybody's like, "Where's Dad?" And he's gone on a walk with
You're walking the dog.
because he, he's
He's
tired of
overwhelmed.
hanging with our family.
I have anxiety issues.
That's great. Your dog probably loved your anxiety.
Yeah, loves that. So.
He's a big snacker at night. I'll hear him in the pantry like your children,
Pounding it.
rambling through things like a little rat.
I love it. What are your go-tos, Danny?
So yeah.
Be honest.
Yeah. So this is a weak moment for me, but trying to be really healthy. But man, like king dongs,
like
and a glass of milk. That's my kryptonite.
Wait a minute.
If they're in the house, I can't help it.
Straight chocolate and milk.
No, but it has a little cream filling.
Yeah.
There's a little cream filling, little cakey things. So
But he usually waits till I'm in bed because he knows he'll get the eyes from
And
me.
here's what's odd. Here's what's really odd. She didn't say this, but I hide those.
Really?
She doesn't know that I bought them, but I'm hiding them like from the grandkids because they get in my stuff.
That's so good. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I've been meaning to confess something to Lindley, and this gives me opportunity.
Okay, well, confess.
The other night, Lindley normally takes a bath at night, and it's kind of my time with the boys or watching the Braves or something. I got a feeling that I was going to want some ice cream, and I wanted some whipped cream on top. Mm-hmm. So I took the Cool Whip out of the freezer, and I set it in a very secret place on the counter so that she wouldn't see
It
it.
was on top of the air fryer, and I walked around, and I was like, why is the...
Here she is. She comes out, looks around the corner. Why is the
First
Cool
thing she
Whip
sees.
out?
I was like, why is there whipped cream on the air fryer? And
I was like, busted, shoot. Because I wanted her to believe I'm having bananas and fruit out there, but
yeah, no, I
I
know
wanted
better.
ice cream. But, man, I'm like you, Danny. At night, I got to have something sweet, man.
We're snacky people.
Rhonda was an amazing athlete in high school.
No.
She was really.
Talk about her athletic career and what people may not know.
So what you may not know about my wife, Rhonda, was I've got some great stories. So in high school, she actually got kicked out of a basketball game for fighting. She got thrown out of a game. She was fighting in basketball.
Are you serious? You got a technical foul, kicked out of the game.
Thrown out. I
Wow.
ejected.
The other girl started it.
Yeah, sure she did. So the other thing, she was also an all-county softball player until they threw a ball or hit a ball. I can't remember the whole story, but it hit her right in the face. She broke her nose playing softball.
Oh,
Had to
really?
have surgery. So
Wow.
that was yeah.
Wow.
So she's the real deal, man. She's tough.
That's tough.
Rhonda, how did that athletic background help you for being a pastor's wife? Make some connections here.
Well, it helped me to be a boy's mom.
There you go.
Grandson's mom. Yeah. I don't know how I connect that.
She's tough.
You had to get tough.
You got to be
yeah.
tough. Thick skin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
I don't like drama. Yeah. Tough.
Rhonda, when you get depressed and you just need some retail therapy, what's your weakness?
Home decor.
Really?
Yeah.
You just start
She
buying
could
stuff
spend
for the
her
walls.
life in the Hobby Lobby of the world.
I'm waiting to decorate for fall. It's like, oh, come on.
Oh, yeah. Seasonal. So seasonal stuff.
Amazon is in our house all the time.
Oh, yes.
It's unbelievable.
Very good.
My dad was recently at our house, and he was watching it. We were gone, and he texted me, and he said, you guys get a lot of boxes from Amazon. And I was like, to be fair, those are groceries sometimes. It's, medicine and stuff like that. It's not all just once, but there were a few like sprinkled in
It's temptation.
decor items.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real.
Home decor.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, last one. Any fun trips coming up for you guys? Any vacations? Anything you're gonna do fun this year?
Yeah, we just had a great fun trip. I just digress, but we went to England
Oh, nice.
back in the spring, back in May
May and June.
We were there for about 10 days. It was a family wedding, but we took extra time. Man, that was awesome. We had not been really through the countryside of England. We spent the night in a castle. The wedding venue was like a 600-year-old church building. It was unbelievable. And so that was a cool thing. We've got some trips planned coming up. We like the mountains. We like the beach. We've been to the beach this year.
Very nice.
So we do take our time away. We're trying to maximize those season years,
But that's been something different in our transition. With a church, we had a sabbatical time and we had some weeks off. And in this role he's in now, agreeing to preach every Sunday, I've had to go into his calendar and put on there trip with Rhonda, and he'll say, "Where are we going?" I said, "I don't know, but you're doing something."
That's good.
And so I mark off a week with a Sunday in there so he won't book it. And so I kind of go through the year. Our anniversary, I've already marked off a week before or after. He can choose, but it's a trip with Rhonda.
That's awesome.
That's good. That's smart.
Sharing the calendar has really helped us. Yeah, it's been good.
Awesome. Well, we love you guys. Thank you for being on the show.
love
Thanks for sharing what you've shared. Can't wait for this to air, and for being so real about it.
So thankful for your friendship and so proud of you guys. Love you so much.
Thanks.
Precious family.
The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard, show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden, photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley, recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.